I am here today with Kristy Mochel with 180 Insurance. Thanks for agreeing to do this, Kristy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there's been some things going on in the insurance world that we're going to talk about. Kristy's been in the business for 25 years now.
25, yeah.
And so she's seen it all. And so hopefully we can get you some good information and help you navigate what's going on these days, especially in the world of homeowners insurance, which is where it affects myself and my clients mostly. So I saw a map of the United States and it showed the states with the highest premiums. And I was a little surprised to see Kansas was one of the higher states. Oklahoma was even higher. Missouri was a little bit lower for some reason. I guess Tornado Alley maybe. And then it showed states on the western coast
For different reasons, obviously.
Well, yeah. Well, no, their premiums were much lower, like a third or a fourth, and even though their home values are a lot higher. And then, of course, Florida was probably the top of the list in those, I guess, flood states. So tell us what's been going on the last couple of years with homeowners insurance and the premiums.
Okay. So Kansas and Missouri, let's just kind of focus there.
Yeah.
We're seeing just 20 to 40% renewal increases this year. Hopefully next year they're going to flatten out. Last year was a lot better on renewals, but we also had a lot of storms, a lot of hailstorms, a lot of windstorms. Like last night was crazy. And every time there's a storm, whether it's just a few neighborhoods or they consider it a catastrophe claim or a catastrophe situation where Olive Prairie Village, let's say, gets hit with a hailstorm, that kind of thing. Things like this, they just make premiums increase. And I think what we've seen over the past maybe 3 or 4 years is these premiums have been pretty stable, right? And then with all these hailstorms that we've had and all the windstorms, now we're seeing companies have to go back and get back the money that they've lost, right? So we're seeing, like I said, anywhere between 20 and 40% renewal increases. The other thing that we're seeing right now is increases in wind and hail deductibles. So when I started, you could get easily $500 wind and hail deductible. Now companies are moving to either a minimum of $5,000 for your deductible. They don't want your roof more than 10 years old. They are looking at doing depreciated value on roofs if they are over 10 years old. And some companies are doing a 1 or 2% wind and hail deductible, which is interesting for the client because a lot of times they don't know what that means. So you think it's a 1% deductible. So you're thinking maybe, well, that's 1% of the claim. So if it's a $10,000 claim, it's a $1,000 deductible. That's not true. It's a percentage of your dwelling amount. So if you live in a $200,000 house and you have a 1% deductible, then it's going to be $2,000. But if you live in a $700,000 house and you have a 1% deductible, it's going to be $7,000. So there's just a lot of things that are changing in the marketplace right now.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask is, are insurance companies changing their policies or their deductibles to kind of account or to maybe make up for some of the losses as well? And that was basically what you're referring to.
Right. I know that a lot of the big companies right now, and I don't want to name names necessarily, but I can say, for example, a couple companies that I work with, Safeco in Kansas and Missouri now will do a 1% wind and hail deductible, and they don't go any lower. Travelers is $5,000. And I know a lot of other companies that are making changes after the first of the year as well.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we talked about my policy where it was pretty good premium increase this last time from what I thought was already kind of high, from maybe $3,100 to $3,900. Of course, I'm like, gosh, maybe it's time to compare and shop around and see what we can do. And then was told that basically I'm grandfathered in on one of these.
The deductibles?
Yeah, where they would replace it without depreciating. And then you informed me that may be changing. Yeah. So yeah, which is the only reason I kept paying the high premium, was because I thought, well, there may be some payoff if I can get lucky and get a hailstorm here. But
Right. I kind of thought the same thing this year because the company that I'm with still offers a $1,000 deductible. That's going away next year. But also, I think my insurance renewed in July and I had a $1,000 increase. So Yeah, it's happening to all of us.
Yeah. Which actually, after talking to you, maybe a $900 isn't so bad in the grand scheme of things. So
Yeah, I've seen larger, unfortunately.
I'm sure you have. So one of my questions, which you answered, is, are these increases related to natural disasters and
Absolutely.
windstorms and hailstorms and that
Right.
sort of?
We're finding that, let's say ABC Insurance Company, you would think, okay, well, we're in Kansas and Missouri, so we shouldn't have to pay for storms that are happening in other places. Well, it's all the big picture, right? It's not just what's happening in the Midwest. We have to look at the East Coast and the West Coast and things that are happening down south as well. I mean, the huge hurricane and disasters that we had this year.
So here in Kansas, let's say we have a lot of claims due to tornadoes, hailstorms, windstorms, etc. Do the insurance companies basically pass those losses on to just their Kansas clients, or do they kind of spread it nationwide?
So I'm going to give you the best answer I can on that, which is what my company reps are telling me.
Okay.
I think that's the best way to do that. So my company reps will only look at Kansas and Missouri. I have one company in particular right now that they're not writing new business in Missouri, but they're writing new business in Kansas.
So interesting.
Right? I have another one who it's the opposite, right? They're looking for more business in Missouri and they're not writing in Kansas. So every company, I think, is taking this information a little bit differently.
Right.
I think overall, we all know that what happens in the nation is going to affect us, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter where we live. But more specifically in the Midwest, if you ask an insurance company representative, they're going to say, we're doing what we can to stabilize in Kansas. We're doing what we can to stabilize in Missouri. But if we're having a ton of losses in that state, we have to do what we have to do.
So it's just riskier to have a house in Oklahoma and Kansas than it is maybe in, I think one of the states with a really low premiums was Nevada. So I guess they don't have
As many, right?
storms and hurt. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
And it's like Colorado too, because of the fires, right? So it's every different state that you look at, I think they have their own
natural
special-
disasters.
special things to look at.
Yeah. Okay. It's probably a combo answer. And if you live in a risky area, there's going to be some premium,
But we have people move here from Florida that think our rates are just absolutely fantastic.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you talk about getting hit hard.
Right.
And they've been hit. So what are some things, if any, that homeowners can do to try and save some on their premium without sacrificing coverage? Is there
right.
anything?
And that's really what we all look at, right? Is, okay, I have this great insurance policy, but maybe I need to cut some things to see if I can save money or raise my deductibles, which the companies are kind of doing for you at this point. I really do think that in the next couple of years, things are going to kind of even out. In the Midwest, in Kansas and Missouri specifically, there are things that I wouldn't cut out of an insurance policy. For example, water backups for sewer drain sump pump.
Right.
Please don't cut that out. That's probably the second most popular claim that I see is someone's sump pump stops working and they get water ick in their basement. I think that's probably one of the most important coverages to have on there. And most people don't realize that's not an automatic coverage. It's something that has to be endorsed onto a policy. I'm going off into
No, I was going to ask
another
you,
side, but outside of maybe changing some deductibles and looking at some things like that, I don't know that there's necessarily anything great that I would say that I would cut from a policy.
Right. So what do we do?
I know.
Do we come to somebody like you who can shop?
I mean, I've
20
always
different companies.
Yeah. So I've always been a big advocate of an independent insurance agency, not only because I own one, but just in general. Because with what we call captive companies, which would be an insurance company that only writes with one company, right? They're really limited on what they can do. They can raise deductibles or take away coverages, things like that. And like I said, I don't necessarily think that's a good idea. But with an independent agent or a broker, what you can do is you can go to them and talk to them about your coverage. What can I change? Are there any better rates out there? Let's say that I'm with ABC Insurance Company and I have a 35% renewal increases. What can I do? Well, touch your independent agent and see if they can quote other companies.
Right.
I mean, I'm a small agent. I have 10 different companies that I work with.
Okay.
There are companies in town that will have 20 to 30 insurance companies that they can shop with. So look for a good insurance company. Look for a good insurance agent. I'm definitely not a company basher, but I do think that independent agents just have more answers.
Well, it kind of goes back to the example you gave about company A is out of Kansas, but they're in Missouri, and company B is out of Missouri, but in Kansas.
Right.
I do know this, and this was kind of eye-opening to me, was how big of a difference there can be in homeowners insurance premiums.
Well, and even by zip code, because I'll have someone call and say, hey, I'm moving from Overland Park to Prairie Village. Everybody loves the village, including me. But guys, you got some big trees. And when those big hailstorms come and knock those trees onto houses, that's one of the areas that we're seeing bigger increases rather than maybe South Johnson County where there's not a lot of trees, right? So it does matter by zip code. And someone will move from one city to another and they'll have an increase or decrease in their premiums based on claims history, not only for them, but in the area.
But even for the same zip code, company to company, I've seen some pretty significant differences in premiums.
Which is hard to understand. It's basically, I'm even renter's insurance. I'm moving from one zip code in Overland Park to another. Why did I get a $50 increase? But it's all zoned.
Yeah. So I've told people a lot in the mortgage world, we've got to be pretty competitive. I believe if you call 100 mortgage companies, 80 of us are going to be within 1/8% and a few $100s in fees, because we all get our money from the same place.
Right.
Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA. And then there may be some that are off by a quarter, one way or the other. Then there'll be some outliers. But for the most part, we're all doing the same thing. So it really comes down to your mortgage person, et cetera. But the area that people have the most control over, or any control over really, is their homeowner's insurance. The taxes are what they are.
Right.
Interest rates kind of are what they are. But homeowner's insurance, they can put a little effort in and come to somebody like you who can help them.
Right. You have to do an estimate on insurance, right? So one of the things that we talk about in our classes is whatever you told them last year, just increase that by 20%, figure that in. But yeah, getting an agent that can do multiple things is very important. An example literally happened today. I had a new person buying a new house and was referred by a realtor to me. I did insurance quotes for her, and the range, I'm not kidding, was between $2,800 a year and $8,000 a year, depending on the company.
So that's what I was referring to, is the gap between company and company B can be huge.
And they're both great, and they were both really great A+ rated companies.
So the $2,800
Very well known.
policy is not that much different than the $8,000
No.
policy?
The policies were almost identical, and we
Crazy.
had that much of a difference.
Yeah. That's yeah. Got me a little speechless there, but yeah. So yeah, that's a huge gap.
It is.
And again, that's like, $5,000 a year, depending on your loan size. That's like, hey, you just got a 1% lower rate on your $400,000 mortgage. People be fired up.
And even if you don't want to go to an independent agent, at least I would say get 3 quotes.
Do it on.
Minimal.
Right.
Especially right now, whether you're buying a new house or refinancing, or you get your bill and your sticker shock, I would look at a minimum of 3 quotes.
Yeah. My final question, you kind of already answered, is what coverages do you really recommend people have on their policies that sometimes get overlooked or don't get added?
Right. So a home insurance policy is pretty much a box, right? These are the things that come in it. And there are some extras. I mean, I think what we see here for sure is the wind and hail, and figuring out those deductibles moving forward, making sure that you've got some money in savings so that if you do have a $5,000 deductible and you have to replace your roof and it's $15,000, I mean, it's better to pay 5 than 15.
Right.
Of course. So that's a given. The water backup, sewer drain, sump pump coverage, that's a big one. And some companies may do sewer backup. They may do water backup. It may be separate things.
Okay.
But you want to have coverage so that if your sump pump stops working, like I said, you get water in your basement. You don't want to deal with that. And usually you can get those with pretty low deductible. It doesn't have to match what you have on the policy. And then
Is it fairly inexpensive?
most of my deductibles for that is $1,000.
But I mean, the coverage itself doesn't increase the overall premium by a lot.
Not a lot.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised. But if you have a finished basement, I will say I would have at least $25,000 in coverage for that.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
It's just a given. Even if you don't have a finished basement, I would put a minimum of at least $10,000 on there. That I'm a big advocate for that endorsement on all home insurance policies. We quote it and talk to people about it right from the get-go.
Right.
We don't not quote it. So
it's just on
it's on everything.
Yeah.
If they don't want it, we actually make them sign off on it. That's how strongly I feel about it.
Okay.
And then we've got some new things that have come out in the last couple of years, like equipment breakdown coverage, which is not a warranty and it doesn't cover wear and tear. But if a motherboard goes out or something explodes or a lightning strike or something like that, you'd have money in there to replace those if they can't be repaired. There's also an endorsement that you can put on there that will cover the lines that run from the house to the street. So like utility line coverage, which people don't really think about that.
Right.
But the city is not responsible for anything that happens on your property. So if it goes out to the street, that's a different situation and you can negotiate and talk to them about that. But what I'm talking about is all of the lines that are going to run under your property, right? So your gas line, any utility line, your cable line, all of those things. If there's an endorsement that you can add on there that would help you pay for that if it tears, breaks, you put a shovel through it, that kind of thing.
What about sewer line?
Yeah, water backup, sewer drain, sump pump. I say that kind of fast.
Oh,
water
that's
backup,
part of the
sewer drain, sump pump. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can get coverage now for your sewer line.
Okay.
So if you get cracks, tears, things like that. Now, if it's kind of a caveat in the fact of it's different for every company. So I cannot say this is how it works.
Okay.
Because every company is going to be a little bit different.
Gotcha.
Some won't cover for wear and tear. They'll only cover if there's an incident, right? Like a tree falls over, the roots come up, that kind of thing. So you really need to talk to your agent about what any of these endorsements really cover, because unfortunately, all the different companies that you have, the coverages are not going to be exactly the same. The other thing that you would think was just a given, it's not. Make sure you have replacement cost coverage on the structure. Make sure that you have replacement cost coverage on your personal property. Make sure that you have loss of use coverage. Loss of use coverage is going to be if you have some kind of covered claim and you cannot live on the property while we're doing repairs, then we've got money to put you up in a hotel until you can move back in.
Okay.
So these things are just really important.
Okay.
You want a replacement cost value policy. So let's say, for example, you have a fire and your living room is destroyed and you have a $5,000 leather couch, right, that is 5 years old. You don't have replacement cost coverage on your policy. Well, then what will happen is we're going to take that $5,000 5-year-old couch and we're going to depreciate the value. So you don't have the money to go out and replace it. But if you had a replacement cost policy, you would. So it would replace it for what it would cost today.
So you're going to tell me my $5,000 couch is now worth $1,000? You give me $1,000?
Probably.
A new couch that now
Right.
costs $7,000? Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
I got you.
So that's why replacement cost is very important.
Yeah. It's the same thing on a roof,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Similar.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's talk about that sewer line one more time. I live in a neighborhood where 60-year-old, and 2 houses one direction, sewer line, 2 houses in the other direction. Now I'm at the end of a cul-de-sac sewer line, so they're apparently getting to the age, and then we've got big oak trees, and so when you said the sewer water backup, et cetera, yeah, I missed the sewer part because I've seen that firsthand, and I know how much they spent to have basically their sewer line redone from the house to the street.
Right.
And so spent a lot of money, and houses still the same house, just the yard's now torn up.
Right. Right. So like I said, some companies, you can get an endorsement for it, but you need to be very specific and ask your agent, okay, what does this cover? So let's say company A on the sewer coverage will cover anything no matter what happens. And you've got a $25,000 limit on it. So if it's a $30,000 job, we're going to cover $25,000. You've got a $1,000 deductible. Okay. Company B, however, may say, well, we don't cover for wear and tear. So if it's just because it's 60 years old
Right.
and you didn't take care of it, or you could have done some kind of preventative maintenance, then we're not going to cover it.
Okay.
So that's very specific.
Yeah, there was nothing that I think it was just.
It just
They
happened.
just-
Do you know if they had any insurance coverage for it?
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
I don't believe
So that, I think that's a pretty important question to
Yeah.
ask your insurance agent.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good advice.
Because every company, fortunately or unfortunately, is going to cover that a little bit differently.
Okay. So any parting thoughts, piece of advice for anybody that might be watching this?
You know, I think it's important to have an insurance agent that you know, like, and trust. I think it's important that you can reach out to them anytime with questions. I think it's important that they have good customer service, because when you need them the most, you need to make sure that they're going to be there for you. So all of the things that we talked about, hopefully people took notes and they call their agent and say, okay, so I was listening to a pod and I thought I'd call and ask these questions. Do I have water backup coverage if my sump pump stops working? Do I have sewer coverage? Do I have replacement cost coverage? Because I would rather that you know now than to have something catastrophic happen and then
Find out you're not covered.
find out you don't have enough coverage.
Yeah, I know of some people who have had the they called it a flood in the basement, but it was most likely a sump pump or water backup, and then to find out that that's not covered,
Right.
Is
So water backup, sewer drain, sump pump coverage is going to be if the sump pump dies, right? Flood coverage is a different animal. No home insurance company covers flood. And flood is considered water that comes in through walls and windows. So you have to think about that. When you have walls or water come through your basement, where's it coming in, right? Is it a leaked pipe, which potentially would be covered?
Yeah.
Is it your sump pump, or is it coming through walls or windows? Because that's a flood insurance policy, not a home insurance policy.
Well, then we're going to hope it's the sump pump.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. All right. Great. So I appreciate your time and the information. This has been very helpful. And yeah, we'll do it again sometime. And,
All right.
yeah, I'll come up with some more questions.
Sounds great.
So, all right. Thank you.
Thanks.